Hello and welcome to another devlog. This is number 14. So starting right up, we were working on Monday over jumping over the cover functionality. So in order to do this, I had to go in and with a clean project and decipher the Invector demo once again to figure out how it was doing the jumping over cover action. And basically, I learned how to use their generic actions and how they work. So adapting that and setting up a generic action enabler on this cover. When the player gets close enough to it, it listens for a input, and then it triggers an action, specifically a animation, which is a root animation. So I'll demonstrate that now. When it gets close to the trigger, you can now press the newly set up input action button A to jump over the cover. On both sides, it will work. There's some caveats to this since it's using root motion. It will not allow me to jump over cover with a depth greater than 1/4 of a unit. So there is some limitations, but in its basic sense, it is functional. So I can use this to hop over, no problem. Later on, I could adapt it and work with more animations and get it more advanced to actually maybe jump over a cover that's maybe 1 unit wide, but that's for later. Okay, Tuesday. I wanted to rework the behavior to control rounding the corners. Previously, it would only let you allow to round corners if it wasn't the side facing the camera. I wanted to change that to lock you into all corners so that you could actually use the cover aim from all covers from all corners. So I had to rework that. So now when you're on a corner, you have to angle your movement to that direction and then press the action button to execute. This is a better solution in my opinion. So I was running into a bunch of issues with making these changes, and overall through this week I was noticing that Invector provides base functionality, but either adapting it to my project or something was causing a lot of these issues to happen, where I had to really polish up the corner rounding behavior. Specifically, one of the issues was when you round a corner, it would, in this direction, it would automatically take control and turn you back around. Or if you were in the back here, sometimes if you were in this direction, it would take over and point you back around. So the default behavior was not quite right. So I had to override a lot of the base behavior in order to get it to behave properly and pretty much stay in the orientation that I am currently in and not have the system take over and point you in a specific direction. So really ironing out the behavioral issues with rounding cover. On Wednesday, I started on the meat and potatoes of the work week, which was cover to cover transitions. Once again, I took began taking a look at the InVector demo to see how it worked and how I might adapt it to my uses. One of the discoveries I made along the way in the code was for the coroutines, the yield, return, wait for end of frame was actually causing the coroutines to freeze up unless you return to the actual gameplay window. The coroutines will not complete their execution on that. And InVector employs a lot of those for certain reasons. And another discovery along the week, I found that I needed to actually use that to sort out one issue with my hologram. So it wasn't a solution to actually just remove them, but I realized that that was the issue for some of the problems, specifically not knowing why when you start the game, it doesn't automatically execute the auto equip function. You actually have to go into the game in order for that to happen. So the coroutines, they need to execute and finish up by calling wait for end of frame. So wait for end of frame is a good way to sync up if something's going wrong. Like I found my VFX marker. This is to sync up the synchronous threads and make sure everything's running right. So specifically, when the enemy controller was losing sight of me, the holo marker would be spawning, but it wouldn't have the helmet or the weapon. Looking into the process, some sort of issue where calling get child component meshes, when I was doing my testing, it would work properly, but for some reason when the AI calls it in its process, the system returns the static meshes with no vertices data, so they wouldn't show up. But adding a wait for end of frame coroutine alongside that fixed the issue right up. So that was a side note. Another thing I discovered sometimes that using the automatic function when I change things, it's convenient to hit the save button here. But the problem is, I discovered later, is that it'll save the values you input, sure, but it'll also save other app values that InVector might have loaded during runtime into its property fields. And that can cause a bad state in the component. So when you play it again, all of a sudden things are broken, things are misbehaving, and you don't know why. What happened? What did I break? So this is not really a safe way to do it unless you're working with your own class and you know that there's no runtime input values that are going to be saved without your knowing and actually break things. So maybe not save it automatically with InVector components, but maybe with your own components as a convenience. I did this twice. The second time I realized what I'd done and I was easily able to reset the component. But the first time I actually had to go back to a clean state, a clean commit, and rebuild the functionality to where it was stable. So Wednesday, working on cover-to-cover transitions, I was having a real challenge. And InVector, once again, is very rough in the base implementation. What was happening is, depending on which side I approach cover from, the right or the left, it would always... So left side, face left, right side, face right. But InVector would take this direction and it would flip you back around. Or here it would flip you back around. Just a lot of the random InVector taking you over and flipping you around to where you shouldn't be. So I had to I had to use all the tools at my disposal and pretty much go in and draw in-game ray lines and really visually see what was going on. You can actually draw, not gizmos, but just ray lines, debug draw a line, and you can see, okay, this is the angle it's computing at, and then this is the 2 angle over here. So it's much easier to visually debug that way, and also make heavy use of not console output. That has its own place, but to monitor multiple variables and their state changes in real time, you can't be looking at the console. It scrolls past. You'll never see. You can't see the whole picture as it's happening. So, making use of a list like this in the inspector to see the actual current state of all the variables that depend on the actions as they're happening is the best way to do it. I've found. So I make heavy use of this in my own custom implementations, and that helps me get to the root of the problems faster and fix issues without going completely insane. So eventually I got to the right solution. So depending on where you're entering and also where you go to cover, it'll go to the right cover and it'll end in the right. So transitioning from cover to cover, it would not end up in the right position. So if it is adjacent, like a 90-degree angle, it'll be facing forward. If it's along the side parallel, yeah, perpendicular, forward, parallel, the same direction, pretty much. Going to cover, you have multiple choices, but you cannot go to the same cover line that you're on, and you cannot can't go to the same cover line you're on, and you can't go. So I had to. That's probably another day. I lost my train of thought. Anyway, moving on to Thursday. Didn't get too much done. I polished up the slide-in animations. There's some issues where Invector's movement into cover and sliding into cover, it was very choppy, and from my past experience I realized that's usually an issue with multiple pieces of code fighting over the transform at the same time. It was looking very rough when you slide into cover. It was really jagged and not smooth at all. So removing some of Invector's code did the trick. So now when you move into cover or you slide into cover, it's very smooth and proper. So a lot of polish of Invector's rough edges. There was also an issue with the nav mesh. It would take a improper route because of the robot's nav mesh, but fixing the weight did the trick in that situation. So on Friday, I worked on the actual spawning of the markers of where you end up. So the algorithm will actually take the point and allow you only to move to the point that's closest to you. So so you have to use your left thumbstick to actually aim towards where you want to go. So now I'm aiming left, now I'm aiming up. And the algorithm will take the cover line and actually give you the point of the closest available point. So you can't pick any cover line point. So I had to get fancy with making a wrapper class to track multiple coroutines and multiple objects when you change cover points, so it would fade one out and fade in the other, and there's no jagged animation, so it would easily, you know, one to the other, looking nice and smooth, nice and good, fade in, fade out. And in order to get these markers, instead of just like an A button marker, like a static image, I want to do something a little bit more fancier. Say, okay, that's where you're gonna move. And I reused my hologram VFX. And in order to get those meshes, what I did, I had to write a little editor script to pose my character in the 0, 0 position, because I found out when you capture a mesh, you can't apply normal transforms to it. It works differently. It works like on a 4x4 matrix. And applying mesh and rotation, it gets all messed up. And we try to put it in the world, it actually does weird things like clips. So the only way I could actually get it right is to pose myself at a 0, 0 world position and write a little editor script. Or I actually didn't write this, but I found this online. There's a new tool where you can actually go into your component properties and then write a little script to say, okay, save this current mesh component to a file location as an asset. So that was great. I could actually capture a code generated mesh and save it for later, and that's what I did. I captured one for the crouching and then one for the standing. So writing algorithms to find the cover point and actually, well, this is an interesting demonstration here. Let's try to run this again. This is too close. He actually just walks right past it because it's too close. So if we set this apart and run it again, you can see now how remember classes. Okay. What else do we have here? So on Saturday, I fixed a bunch of smaller issues as I spotted them. I also implemented the X-ray functionality so you can see the character from behind cover. That was relatively painless, and I followed a tutorial just by changing some render pipeline settings. In the last hour, I spent working on starting functionality to work on the aim assist. With all my tools at my disposal, it's going to be some work, but no more than a challenge that I've overcome already. Okay, so it's running again, so we can now see it'll detect, and now it'll know, okay, this cover is a taller cover, so we will put a standing animation. And if you move from a smaller cover to a, let's see, why is this, oh there it is, it'll go standing and then it'll go back to cover. So it's all looking good, aiming's working, everything's working how it should. You can pop out from cover from all sides. All the issues are ironed out, moving from cover. It's looking pretty solid. So here's the, if you haven't seen it already, the X-ray. So you can actually see where he is from behind cover. I used one of the materials from the Amplify shader and shader pack. It's the X-ray. And more apparently is when you're behind tall cover. You can actually see what's going on. I want to, when you're doing a cover, you can just see his tail poking out there, but I want to see my marker behind cover as well, so you can do that. Also demonstrating the slide functionality, so let's see if I can do this. If you're far enough away, the built-in functionality, you'll actually slide into cover like that. It's pretty cool. If he's not too far away, he'll just run into the cover. Eventually, if the cover is close enough, I want to do different transitions so he doesn't always run. But if it's close enough, say he'll do a turn, like a turn animation. Just turn around the corner, or maybe like a cartwheel across here, or maybe even a jump. That would be fun. Just kind of jump across the gap. But that's for later. But the basic transition cover to cover is working properly, and it's not buggy or janky at all. So that was the end of the week. So next week I will start and work on the aim assist. So when you're aiming at a target, there's a range, it'll actually start sticking to the target better for easier aiming. And probably adding a couple more weapons. Assault rifle and dual wield pistols is on the agenda. And then for all the new weapons, doing stealth camo. So when you go camo, the actual weapon goes hidden as well. The last things, so I'm almost done with the player epic feature set. The last thing to do would be to implement a basic audio manager to implement the sound effects just for player shooting. I couldn't find an SFX pack that I wanted to purchase, but there was one that was for free that actually hit the mark. So I'll take the free one just to implement some basic sound effects. All the paid ones were, the SFX sounded like, I don't know, Star Wars. Not really what I was looking for. But that will wrap up the last of my epic for new player features, and I'll have to do a roadmap for another leg after that. So probably get done with it next week, I imagine. But that's about all to discuss for this week, and we will check in with you next time. Thank you. Goodbye.